Hello, I'm Tony Jones, CEO of One Nucleus. The main objective of One Nucleus has always been to enable our members to maximise their research and business performance. Fundamental to this are activities to bring people together in order to share insights and challenges and collectively discuss so that they seek the best solutions. Our membership and network is littered with companies and individuals making exciting advances in science, in technology and in business with the life sciences sector. Enabling those high achievers to share their insights in order to enable further success is a key part of the One Nucleus ambition. Be that through speaking at events, contributions to our electronic communications, on our training courses, or whilst networking informally over a drink at one of our events. The astute listeners amongst that group pick up on these insights of the thought leaders in our industry, and they spot trends. Then they go away, plan strategically to succeed in these times of increasingly rapid change. Nowhere is this more true than in the area of communications. As social media transforms our private lives, what role does it have to play in our future business communications? What should we be talking about? To whom? And how do you best engage that audience? What's an appropriate tone to take when dealing with different stakeholders? Some will be experts, some won't. How will video transform the way you communicate with those stakeholders? These and many other questions have encouraged us to spend some time thinking about the future of communications for our industry and engaging our members in helping to shape and harness it. As Rudyard Kipling said over 150 years ago, words are, of course, the most powerful drug used by men. This is an industry developing new drugs. A century and a half later, and combining powerful words with great images and media technology platforms means our members have the opportunity to breed confidence amongst patients, amongst investors, regulators, and very importantly, talent pools that we want to encourage into our sector. You really can influence the future for better. We don't have all the answers, but we know people who do. So we've worked with our partners at Gigabox and Cambridge TV and with our members to produce this film to harness their crystal ball gazing qualities to stimulate thoughts for you.
My name is Daniel Mahony. I'm a partner at Polar Capital.
I'm Lauren Munton. I am VP of Integrated Marketing at Abcam.
I'm Claire Thompson. I am Chief Executive of Agility Health Tech.
So my name is Peter Packer. I'm the CEO of Crescendo Biologics.
I'm Donna Washtell. I'm Head of Communications for Cambridge Epigenetix.
My name is Graham Mills. I'm a founder of a technology startup in Cambridge called Biotechspert.
My name is Jeroen Claus. I run a small medical animation company called Phospho, based in London.
I'm Sabine Jaccaud. I'm from AstraZeneca and I'm Director of Communications for Cambridge.
I'm Sarah Brereton. I'm a Director at Limewash.
My name's Steve Palmer. I'm Director of Communications at the Wellcome Institute and the Wellcome Genome Campus.
Sue Charles. I'm Managing Partner of the Life Sciences practice at Instinctif Partners.
The audience will depend on the business. But if we take a sort of life sciences or pharmaceutical company as an example, then you're going to have a certain level of engagement through various stakeholders. So you might be looking at the public as one, potential investors, funding bodies, even government, nice organisations, that kind of thing.
So we work with a lot of biotechs and they're all fishing in the same investment space. So I guess the key audience for them is investors. And why should they put their money there? So what sets them apart, what differentiates them, and what impact are they going to have?
The main people who I speak to are potential investors. So that could be retail, could be private wealth managers, could be pension funds. So mainly professional investors, but all the way down to retail and media as well, I suppose, to some degree.
Our employees, without them, we have nothing. Our investors and potential investors are very important to us at the moment, and also those thought leaders in our industry, just making sure we're building those relationships with those people.
The other key client that we're working with is contract research organisations, and they want to sell their services and their products. So again, it's what differentiates your products, what stories are you telling, and can your clients help you to tell your stories for you?
The message that we're trying to communicate is one that healthcare is a place that people should be looking at with respect to investment, that there's lots of investment opportunities there, and also that change is happening, and obviously you need an expert specialist in order to invest successfully in that sector.
And certainly what we've seen in the last 10 years probably, is a much more involvement of patients and patient-centric communications. So rather than perhaps patients being right at the end of the communication line, now they're at the centre, and charities and patient groups and advocacy and are getting much more involved, and that's really driven by the personalisation of medicine. So it's not a turn up at your doctor, get a pill, go away. It's much more involved than that these days.
I think the real challenge in healthcare or life sciences is that the science can be complicated, the stories can be complicated, and quite often companies get bogged down in detail, which I might be interested in, but not everybody else is. And so I think you have to tailor the message to the right recipient, if you like.
Your customers are evolving constantly. Their needs and what they want to receive or hear from you changes all the time. They're only human. And so you need to adapt to that and be constantly listening to them and adapting your communications.
Yeah, you always have to start as early as possible with communications and kind of what's your corporate identity, what would people think about you, what's your image.
If you want to bring across a message, you want to convey what a medical problem is, and you want to show how your technology is going to fix it. You want to be able to direct that message. With VR, you risk the fact that someone's going to look around and miss a crucial thing happening. And you can't really direct the audience's attention in a way that you can with a normal video.
Communication is happening anyway. You don't have a choice. Therefore, the most important thing is to get control. And how do you get control? It's thinking about what your brand is, thinking about what your narrative and key messages are, thinking of the appropriate mechanisms and strategies to address the key audiences, have a plan and execute it.
The very first thing I did, we established a new corporate identity, also to show that there's now a new stage in the corporate development, and it's different from what we did before, and it's a different kind of company. And you have to reflect that in a couple of things, in the news flow, but also in your corporate design, image, website, messaging.
For all of these platforms, they don't act in isolation, and for the best kind of communication strategy, the best content planning is about delivering that consistent message across all of those things, and then finishing it off with, picking up the phone or sending an email or approaching that person, if that's that's the person that you want to influence, to actually say, did you see this? I think in the past I've quite often had people say, well, we want to get this in front of number 10, or we want to get this in front of the Chancellor, get it into the FT. And the FT is a fantastic publication, and of course that's going to work. But sometimes those people are also reading other newspapers and other media, and they're looking at social media, and the only way to really properly influence them is to show that there's engagement and interest and pickup across all of those channels, whether they're traditional or social media.
Is it visionary enough? Is it inspiring enough? Does it enable all of your audiences to get behind it, live it, breathe it on a daily basis? Because brands really only come to life through the actions that happen on a day-to-day basis.
Secondly, I would say never underestimate the emotion, passion and curiosity that there is in this industry, and build that into your communications.
Great comms doesn't have to be complicated, it's really simple, really impactful, and it's memorable.
Social media is integral to everything we do. We don't see it as a separate entity. So throughout all of our communications and campaigns, we use social as one of the channels.
One of the key things about social media that we're learning is that we have to think completely differently from pushing a message out. That it's very much about creating a conversation, but again, in a highly regulated environment like pharmaceuticals, there's only so far you can go with that. There's very strict guidelines on what we can and can't say to the general public. And within those parameters, we can still bring a lot of stories to life. And that's really where we're going.
We see now a lot more clients come to us saying, I need to be on social media. And the answer is probably yes, but to what degree? And make sure that you're there for the right reasons, not because you think you should be. And make sure that you're using the right channels that are relevant for your audience segments, and that you're talking to them in the right way. So the tone of voice and all of that sort of thing becomes increasingly important.
We presently use LinkedIn and Twitter primarily for our social media, and we also use Instagram as well, but we use Instagram in a different way. So we use Instagram to depict behind the scenes life at Cambridge Epigenetix, so we give a bit of a flavour of what it's like to work for us.
When we talk about social media, we tend to talk about platforms such as Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and so forth, but sometimes we don't think about blogs, which can also be a very powerful tool for marketers. And some of our followers became very engaged with us through Twitter. We invited them to write articles on our own blog, which actually went extremely well, got a lot of engagement, and we were delighted to be able to share those scientific experiences and tips and recommendations from customers to the wider community and give them a platform on our own blog.
So with social media as a platform, there are many challenges. One is the regulatory requirements of our industry, so there are things that we cannot say. But on the other hand, we're wanting to engage in conversations. So we also need to look at it in a global perspective. So if we wanted to have a conversation globally around what science can do, there are things that we can put out there that really impact everybody. But the lesson that I would say, the biggest lesson that we're learning right now is timing.
So if I'm talking about a fantastic new piece of research which has a high amount of impact but to a very, very small amount of people, it's a rare disease or a neglected tropical disease. Now, my expectation cannot be the same as if I'm talking about a story about a new cancer therapy. That in terms of the sheer numbers, they're not going to rack up, they're not going to be comparable. And again, it comes back to that. I need to serve those stories up to the right audience to deliver that impact. So then, if I get a million hits on a blog about cancer, but I only get 10,000 hits on a blog about a neglected tropical disease, is one a success and one a failure? I'd argue not.
So for us, it was really focusing on where is the true value being derived from. As part of that, it's really understanding what our own key performance indicators or KPIs are. Sometimes it can be the clicks, the views you get, but fundamentally that's all a surrogate marker for the sales and traction you have and new conversations you have.
You can have a very, very well planned social media campaign, but get it out at a time when the people you're trying to reach are just not thinking about that particular thing. So we tend to find moving towards hotspots of interest, whether it's around congresses or around big milestones, really works very well and brings the content to life, because it's not about what you put out there, it's about how much people will engage with it.
I think it's very difficult to put KPIs on communications. It's always been the case, and in previous roles I've had a similar sort of challenge, and I think the difficulty is if you put one of those KPIs such as, right, you need to do X number of press releases per week or per month, you open up that risk of people saying, people struggling to do a press release to hit the numbers rather than tell the story. So I think it's a much more sensible approach to think about the story first and ensure that you've got a powerful, strong story. And I think then it's about making sure that story aligns with the strategic need of the organisation.
And I'd say also one thing about social media in the industry is that in highly regulated environments, it still feels a little bit scary, a little bit unstable, and actually it's not at all. It's very much where you can create transparency and where you can create a certain openness in conversation. And the opportunity for that is great if you have the appetite to overcome some of the road bumps along the way.
So when we use social media as an early stage technology company, we really very much focus on understanding as quickly as possible what is generating us meaningful conversations. And we try and do that through all new platforms we observe in the hope that we find that diamond in the rough that'll be valuable as a company.
I think it's really difficult to break through the cacophony right now. There's a lot of noise, we're bombarded with information. So I think you need to tailor your content, make it short, make it snappy, and be clear on what the message is and who you're trying to send it to.
We use film much more, and film that includes voices of people actively involved in projects rather than the corporate voice.
I think video is an incredible new opportunity to convey what's happening in the world of life sciences, medical technology and pharmaceuticals to an increasingly wider audience. And especially in an age where healthcare is becoming increasingly a topic of interest for the general public, I think finding a way to communicate what is going on and developing is becoming very important.
So film is becoming incredibly important. I think that's the power again of social media, is making that more accessible. It's things like YouTube. And I think when you have, vloggers and you have people who are making money out of it, and people who are making careers out of it, you can see that this has become incredibly accessible to a wide variety of people. And the idea of influencers and the idea of, that there is another way into the public that isn't through people sat in front of the news at 10 or opening a newspaper every day.
Academic clients will come to us when they have a massive new paper coming out, say in Nature, in Science and Cell. And at that stage, they know that that's a story that they're going to be invited to conferences all around the world for the next year or so to present. And so what they'd like to do is to commission a video that they can use to explain at those conferences.
Essentially, we use short videos with an effort to try and communicate simple messages. And we use those on our website, so that's another distribution channel that we have created, so that's a landing page for us. And we've tried to break up a series of videos explaining different aspects of healthcare as we view them.
It is a new channel and it is powerful. It's been done in a very different way by a new generation, and I think that has a lot of power over the next 10 years, because those people are going to come into the workforce and they are going to question and disrupt a lot of what has been done over the last 3 to 4 years. And over the last 3 to 4 years, I think there's been a lot of good stuff done. I think film has become more mainstream, but I think we've moved, thankfully, away from the classic headshot, somebody smiling and nodding and delivering the party line. It's dull, it doesn't engage anyone, it maybe pampers a few egos, but it doesn't really tell the story in a meaningful way.
So from a website point of view, we're seeing a lot more moving image now. I would say 5 years ago, everyone was embracing the big kind of billboard, static image, this is what we do, and it could be a community image of a lot of people, or it could be a very distinct molecule from a science point of view. Now, it's much more about telling people succinctly and clearly via moving image, and perhaps also overlaid with animation to a certain degree, what they do and how they do it.
The way you can parcel up a story into a bite-sized chunk and get it across to people with emotion, I think is very important. And these days people have less and less time to consume stories or content, so a video is a really great way of getting it across and then being able to consume it on any device that they need.
The more we are getting used to engaging visually with content in our private lives, in our own channels and content, something that is dynamic and in front of you will be where we can really get a serious message across.
You could actually get a really good sense of what that company do, who they do it for, why they do it, within no more than a three-minute video piece. And that's being used a lot more. We use that a lot across a lot of clients' websites. But the added advantage of this video work is that actually we can then use that across multiple channels and multiple platforms. So again, we're back in the kind of social media space. It's a brilliant way of starting to engage with your audiences on a wider scale across those platforms as well.
As the gap in knowledge between what the average customer is doing and what a company's innovation actually looks like, as that gap increases, I think it becomes incredibly important that we improve our systems to bridge the gap of knowledge. I think video is going to be an essential part of that, and it's something we're going to increasingly use as a technology company.
I think what we're going to see is a lot more data used, and so that we can develop more predictive and, I'd say, anticipating what customer needs. So there's a wonderful intersection between a human touch of getting a message across and talking to a customer, but that is powered by information and behavioural data, so we know that what we're talking to them about is relevant.
Cellular molecular systems, we're being more and more able to show those in a really accurate way, where previously we just didn't have the computing power to show correct numbers of proteins in a cell, correct numbers of lipids in a membrane, cells in a tumor. These were always, we were forced to go for artistic representations there because the sheer numbers were impossible. You couldn't easily make 10 million cells.
I think whatever the communication experts are developing, it needs to be more focused, needs to take less time, more quality, less quantity. So going directly to your audiences with the right message and not being confused with kind of just simple salespeople or so selling some cheap stuff or so, or the next software or something.
In 2025, I think our KPIs as communicators in general, but specifically in the life sciences sector, will be about creating a much wider understanding for the need for innovation and the environments that support innovation. So whilst you might say, well, that's an objective rather than a KPI, I think we'll be measured much more on the outcomes that our communication efforts can achieve to enable science, to enable companies to achieve their goals, rather than on outputs.
In terms of social activity moving forward, I think we're going to start to see a lot more live events. So things like live Q&A, live video feed, vlogging. I think we're now more comfortable with the social media platforms themselves, and we know how to use them. And what we've now got to do is create something that becomes really part of that communications journey for those clients, but that integrates seamlessly with the rest of their communication suite as well.
We will need to embrace visual and video communication. That's an rapidly growing trend, which has filtered down to B2B.
In 8 years' time, in 2025, a Director of Communications role will be even busier than it is now. I think 8 years ago, there was less work. Now there's a lot more work, and in 8 years' time there'll be even more work. And that work will be incredibly valuable, but the reason for that will be that the opportunities will just multiply.